I'm very happy to be here to give a brief introduction to the two main speakers who are going to be a lot of fun, I think, and I'll tell you a story that is, I think, very unusual. As you can tell from my bio, I work all over the world, and I consider the conservation in Namibia to be a model for the rest of the world. And a lot of people don't know much about Namibia, but I think you'll learn quite a bit about it in the two short presentations that will go on today. One reason why Namibia is such an unusual and spectacular model is that USAID funded the community-based natural resource management program there for 15 years. So it received long-term sustained funding, and it started off with a major policy change, and that Namibia was in a post-conflict situation just after apartheid, and had become fully independent from South Africa, and had a lot of major governance problems, and of course associated poverty and the need for major capacity building across all sectors. And this program, which was called LIFE, which I think a lot of us thought was a wonderful name because it did spring forth life of all kinds, as you'll see, started off with a national policy change. And that was enabling local communities to gain ownership over their natural resources. And to do so, first creating a community conservancy, which was a new form of land management, and the ability to own their own wildlife in particular. And that was an important change. And that national policy sparked what has been the fastest growth in conservation that I think any of us have ever seen before. But it unleashed the ability for the local people to see the value of their own wildlife, which before, when they didn't have ownership rights, they didn't have the same incentives to steward it, because they gained the ability to have economic values from the wildlife. I was in Namibia, not far from where John lives, a couple years ago, talking with the local people who run one of these conservancies, and asking them, what are the benefits that have occurred here? And this is mostly all of these conservancies, and there are more than 50 of them now, that make up a large percentage of the country. I think it's 16 to 18% of the entire country is now in these communal conservancies, some of which are really huge, 1 million acres. No, they're not all that large, but some are even larger than 1 million acres. So large enough that people can have quite a lot of wildlife and a lot of different benefits. So, and interestingly now, 1/8 of all the country's people benefit or are involved in these conservancies. And each one of them has a committee that is made up of local people. And these are the most marginalized people in Namibia, generally the poorest people in the country. And in a lot of the conservancies, people without a lot of formal education are now running these committees. And in the past 17 years now, it's become quite complex. It's like running a nature reserve, because these things in essence are. And there are major economic benefits that are coming from international tourism, from trophy hunting in some cases, which is quite considerable economic benefit, and from other economic activities. And this has brought up livelihoods and been a major poverty alleviation strategy. So these are, most of the conservancies are run by the people who have been goat herders and still are goat herders. And I was asking this particular group about, about cheetahs. And because there's been this resurgence of cheetahs in a number of areas. And not only of cheetahs, but of other predators and wildlife that had become quite endangered, including elephants and rhinos. And they were telling me how they used to shoot cheetahs upon sight because they would attack their domesticated animals. And that had been, just the normal policy. And that now they don't do that. And so, of course, I asked, well, why? And the first answer was, well, international tourists are coming and they want to see cheetahs. And so, of course, we see the value now. And that's the most obvious answer. But then they went on with a number of other answers, and it started to become, interestingly, an ecology class for me that they were giving me about how, well, the ungulates there become too many of them. They overgraze if we don't let the cheetahs, if we kill the cheetahs. And so we need the cheetahs for the local ecology. And because of that, we therefore have more grass for our own cattle and goats. And so it's a benefit for our direct livelihoods. It also provides us the financing from international tourism. And in a very regulated way, we can have trophy hunting that goes on here. And so these were guys, like I said, who didn't have more than maybe an elementary school education, but they had figured out these ecological principles that many people who have college educations really don't know that much about. And I think it shows a lot about the kind of capacity building that went on in this program and is now still going on and really at scale. USAID paid for capacity building that became very well organized and centralized, where there are a whole host of local NGOs that provide these services. And unlike, unfortunately, many programs, this has very quickly become self-sustainable. So maybe Patricia will provide the statistics, but of the 50-some conservancies, at least half of them now earn enough money from these various activities to pay for all of their own costs. And money goes back for their own development activities, whether it's health or other types of development. So wildlife there has been a driving force for bringing more income into the communities and helping empower people who were very marginalized, and bringing back the wildlife and reconnecting them to the national parks and the whole national park system. So now there's a system in the country that has the official government protected areas, and then it has many more of these communal conservancies run by the local people. And they connect up the landscapes into what conservationists are trying to do, which is large-scale conservation where large roaming animals have the space they need to move. Interestingly, the rest of the world has been learning from this Namibia experience. And right now, as we speak, there's a delegation from, of all places, Mongolia in Namibia, and it consists of ministers and people from 5 different ministries and NGOs, including WWF, World Wildlife Fund. And they're looking at the Namibia experience for how Mongolia can emulate it. And there have been a number of delegations from Namibia to Mongolia, and that's occurred with a lot of other countries, actually, in Southern Africa and elsewhere, Cambodia, and of all places, the United States. We have been organizing groups of people from the Northern Great Plains, which is South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, to go to Namibia to learn from the experiences there. And one of our partners, who's this great rancher who has converted from cows to bison, said, before he went on the trip, he said, it's going to be great to go to Africa, but what can we learn from Africa? Aren't we much more advanced in conservation and natural resources management and economic incentives than Namibia? Well, he came back from this trip and he wrote this fabulous article in which he said, I'm really abashed now because I saw that the challenges post-conflict in Namibia were much greater than the challenges we have in South Dakota. But they've not only overcome them, but they're now a model for everyone else. And there's a heck of a lot we can learn in South Dakota. And he wants people from Namibia to come and help in the ecotourism and private incentives for private people to do conservation on their ranches. And anyway, it's a long story, but I think it's emblematic and symbolic of how Namibia is this example of local people stewarding their own resources, and in doing so, bringing a lot of benefit for themselves and many others as well. But you're going to see that from two people who know it a lot better than I do. So I will stop taking too much time on why Namibia is such a wonderful story for natural resources and why it's been a great story for U.S. government aid as well. And let me introduce the two speakers. The first speaker is John Kasaona, and he's the deputy director of an organization in Namibia called IRDNC. And it's a partner of ours, World Wildlife Fund, and we're really happy he's here. One of the main reasons he's here, interestingly, is next week he's going to be at the TED conference in San Francisco at the main stage with the likes of people like Bill Gates speaking about the Namibia experience. So I don't know if you know about TED, but it's the conference of people who are speaking about innovation, innovative ideas. So it's a really good platform to be able to talk about this program. John's going to tell his story, so I don't want to tell too much about it, but he was born and raised in one of the conservancies that I mentioned, one of these 55 areas at a place called Sesfontein. And he not only is the deputy director of the Integrated Rural Development and Nature Conservation Organization, he's also the chairman of NACSO. And NACSO is this really well-organized group of all the local NGOs or non-governmental organizations that provide essential services to these 55 conservancies. And he has a wonderful life story, I think, about exactly how these communal conservancies have empowered people, including himself and his own family. And so I think we're all honored that he's here with us. And also from Namibia is Patricia Skyer, and Patricia works for World Wildlife Fund, and has been working in CBNRM for a long time, since the mid-90s, I think. She was one of the founders of this whole community-based natural resource management movement in the country. She has a great reputation and has worked at USAID for a number of years, and we were lucky enough that she came back to World Wildlife Fund a couple of years ago and is running an AID-funded project now that she's going to mention today. And she's a wonderful example of the kind of capacity in Namibia for exactly these issues that really the rest of Africa and the rest of the world, surprisingly, are learning from. So without taking more time, I'd like John to come up and speak. And I think the ambassador stepped in. I'd like to say hello and welcome you. John?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tom. Let me first acknowledge the presence of our ambassador. What a privilege to speak to such a wonderful audience. I think today we are here, as it's been said, to just share with you some examples from experience from Namibia, community-based natural resource management. CBN, I'm a big guy, so this thing is a little bit. Namibia community-based natural resource management. But I think before we go there, I would like just to share with you some of my personal stories in Namibia. I think it is about I don't know whether you all know Namibia. It's about a country in the southwest of Africa called Namibia. And most of you that have been following the story of Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt will know where Namibia is, I think. They left Namibia because of its beautiful landscape, the dunes, that are sometimes higher than the Empire State Buildings. Wind and time, at some time, they twisted our landscape into a very strange landscape, and all these strange, ugly looking landscape are actually full of wildlife that's become so adopted to this harsh land. I'm actually coming from a region in the far northwest. It's quite a remote area called Kunene region. And in the heart of Kunene is the village of Sesfontein. This is where I was born. Basically, I'm actually a Himba. Have you guys seen a Himba? Not really. I'm a Himba, and we live a very, very traditional lifestyle. Myself, I grew up looking after our livestock, goat, sheep, and cattle. And one day my father actually took me into the field because he said, boy, I really want to teach you, to tell you how to become a very, very, very good herder. And then he said, if you come across a cheetah eating our goat, a cheetah is a very nervous animal. You know what? If you see it eating a goat, just walk up to it and smack it at the backside. And he will let go of the goat and bugger off. But then he also said, if you ever come across a lion, boy, don't run. If you do that, that animal will chase you and kill you. But there's also another thing. If you come across a leopard, boy, you better run like hell. Try to run faster than even those goats that you are looking after. And I think through this way I tend to learn more about nature. The good thing is that as conservationists, it's very good to know what to confront in a very difficult situation and also what to run for. Because that will help you in the end as a conservationist. I was born in 1971. I look big, but I'm still a young boy. During that time, we lived under colonial apartheid regime. The white South African, during that time, they could hunt and graze their livestock as they wished. But we blacks in the area, we were not regarded as responsible. And whenever we were trying to really hunt to bring something to the house or to protect our livestock, we were called poachers. You know what poachers means? People that kill animals without permission. I don't know who was giving us permission, but we were called poachers, and sometimes we were locked up in jail. And during the same times, you know the history of Namibia. It was during around 1966 and 1990. It was when the US and Soviet interests were fighting over control over Namibia. So it was during wartime, and you know what happened during war. There are a lot of soldiers, and these people, sometimes they also made use of the opportunity to actually kill some of these specially protected species like elephant, rhino, and all these things. And they ended up selling rhino horns for a lot of money. $5,000 US per kilo, it was a lot of money. And during the same year, almost around the same period, we experienced a very, very big drought in the country, where almost everything that was left behind died, even our cattle, and people were hungry. Predators, wildlife were also even skinny. I remember one night when a hungry leopard actually went into somebody's homestead and took a sleeping child out of the bed and actually killed him. So, and that leopard was followed the next day and was killed and in the end we knew that I think the leopard was just doing what it was meant to be doing, because to a leopard, a meat is just meat. Whether it has got 2 legs or what have you, this is just a meat. But I think the good thing is that that leopard was shot, and then afterwards we ended up living the normal life. My family, from my side, we actually lost everything during the drought. And there was now no more livestock for me actually to look after. Then my father decided to send me off to school. Go and get busy somewhere there. The same year I went to school, my father actually got a job with the non-governmental organizations, IRDNC. The founders of IRDNC, the like of Garth Owen Smith, Margaret Jacobson, these people has been living in the community for quite a long time, and they were known by the hetmans, they were trusted by the local people, like our hetman, Joshua Kangombe. And Joshua, our own hetman, also saw what was happening. Wildlife was just disappearing. The situation looked very hopeless. I mean, even the communities themselves, they also started feeling that wildlife is actually disappearing and they wanted them to come back. But these people from this NGO proposed to the hetman that, what if we will provide you some means of salary to the people that you would think, that you trust, can be appointed as a game guard. Game guard